Hello, welcome to the online learning platform. My name is Elias. In this video, I'm going to take you through Unit 4 of International Trade, which is trade policy. Specifically, we are going to look at the tariff and the non-tariff restrictions to international trade. So now, in the later versions, we're going to cover the economic integration and regional integration, but specifically here, we want to build a theory for restriction. Okay, so let me take you through the outline. So number one, the major outline or major component of the outline is that we'll cover commercial policy or the instruments of trade policy. And this is in relation to tariffs and non-tariff barriers to trade. And specifically, we will look at an introduction to tariff, and then we'll cover the effect of tariff protection on domestic resources, as well as the tariff warfare effect. Beyond this, we'll look at the quotas and their trade and warfare effect on the nation, especially the importing nation, and then we'll look at the equivalence between the tariff and the quota. Beyond that, we will bring in the tariff rate quota and analyze its equilibrium effect, and then imports and export subsidies. And in addition, we are going to look at other non-tariff barriers to international trade. The last thing we'll look at is the argument for and against international trade. And if you want to read more on this, you can visit Salvatore with chapter number 8 and chapter number 9. You can also read the module which is on the portal, and it will give you similar information. Okay, so let's begin our analysis by looking at the introduction to tariffs. So a tariff is a tax or duty levied on the traded commodity as it crosses a national boundary. Now, just as any other commodity that you can buy and pay a tax, a tariff is also a tax, but the exception is that this is a tax on commodities that are crossing national borders or boundaries. If you buy a car from Japan, for example, when you are bringing your car into Zambia, you will have to pay a tariff. That tariff is a tax for importing that vehicle. And if you are exporting maize to other countries, you may have to pay a tariff, and we call that the export tariff. Therefore, it should not surprise you that tariffs can be paid both when you're importing and when you are exporting, depending on the objective of the nation. So an import tariff is a duty on the imported commodity, whereas the export tariff is a duty on the exported commodity. With this, I would want to take you through the structures of tariffs. Number one is that we have the ad valorem tariff, and then we have the specific tariff, and lastly, the compound tariffs. Let me take you through these three one by one and see the difference from them and how the nation can use them to influence the tariff rate on the border. So the ad valorem tariff is expressed as a percentage of the value of the traded commodity. Now, this is a tariff that can be imposed as a fixed percentage. So a nation or the government can decide to put, let's say, maybe 10% of the sale value of the face value of a commodity that you're bringing in or that you're exporting out. So if we say the car, you're buying a car from Japan, and the car is $10,000 or kwacha. Let's use kwacha. So 10,000 kwacha. It means that you will have to pay 10% of that 10,000, which is 1,000 in tariff. Meaning the total tariff that you pay, the total amount that you pay plus the amount you use to buy the car will be 11,000. Let's take some examples. So an ad valorem tariff of 20% on a 70 kwacha worth of a vehicle means that tariff paid will be 14,000 kwacha. So how this is done is that we have a 20%, so you have your 20 divided by 100 and then multiplied by the price of a vehicle, which is 70,000. Okay, so from here you'll see that if this be the case, then if you cancel two zeros here, it means you cancel two zeros there, and if you multiply 20 times 700, you end up with 14,000. So this is how you get your tariff, how much tariff is paid for a car which is worth 70,000 kwacha. Now you should also note that with this 14,000, then the total amount paid by the person importing the car is 70 plus 14,000, which will give us 84,000 kwacha. Okay, let's look at another example. So an ad valorem tariff of 20% on a 400,000 kwacha worth of a vehicle means that tax paid will be 80,000 kwacha and total amount paid will be 480,000 kwacha. That is the 80,000 kwacha, which is tariff, plus the 400,000 kwacha, which is the price of the item before the tariff. Okay, let's now look at the specific tax. So the specific tariff is expressed as a sum, a fixed sum per physical unit of the traded commodity. Now this means that for whatever amount of the product you are purchasing is, you will pay the fixed amount of the tariff. This means that the value will not change. If the amount for each imported commodity you bring in, the tax paid is 10,000, it means for whatever units you get, no matter the price, you will pay 10,000 for each of the items. So if you buy a car worth 400,000 kwacha, you will pay 10,000. If you buy a car worth 70,000 kwacha, you will pay 10,000, meaning your tax is fixed. Therefore, the specific tariff is simply a fixed sum per physical unit of the traded commodity. Let's look at an example. Suppose there is a specific tariff of 1,000 kwacha on a 70,000 kwacha worth of a vehicle. This means that the tariff paid will still be 1,000 kwacha because the tariff is fixed. In total, the person or the buyer of the item will pay 71,000 kwacha. That is the 70 kwacha price of the vehicle plus the 1,000 kwacha tax, which will bring the total to 71,000 kwacha. In another example, suppose that a specific tariff of 1,000 kwacha is placed on a 400,000 kwacha worth of a vehicle, then the total tariff paid will be 1,000 kwacha. This is because the tax is fixed. Therefore, the total amount paid will be 401,000 kwacha. Okay, let's look at the short notation that when we go to a compound tariff, this becomes a combination of the ad valorem as well as the specific tax. A compound tariff is one which comprises of the ad valorem, where there is a given percentage of the sale value as well as a fixed amount that should be paid. In an example, if there is an ad valorem tariff of 20% and a specific tariff of 1,000 kwacha on a 70,000 kwacha worth of a vehicle, this means that total tariff will be 15,000 kwacha. Now, how this is done is that you will have your 20% first from your ad valorem tariff. So you say 20 over 100 multiplied by the 70,000 kwacha. plus the 1000 kwacha. Let me put kwacha here. Let me put kwacha. Okay. So plus the 1000 kwacha, which is the fixed tariff. So you have the ad valorem tariff plus the fixed. The combination of these two brought together makes the compound tariff. So here we will get 14,000 kwacha, which we got in our first example when we looked at ad valorem tariffs. And then here we will get the 1000 kwacha, since this 1000 is fixed. So we have 1000 kwacha. And when you add 14,000 plus 1000, you end up having 15,000 kwacha. Therefore, total tax paid is 15,000 kwacha, and this 15,000 kwacha is the compound tax, which comprises of the 14,000 ad valorem plus the 1,000 specific tax. Okay, so let's look at another example. An ad valorem tariff of 20% and a specific tariff of 1,000 kwacha on a 400,000 kwacha worth of a vehicle would mean that the total tax that a consumer should pay is 81,000 kwacha. That is, the 80,000 kwacha will be from the ad valorem tariff and the 1,000 kwacha will be from the fixed tariff. So I will leave this for your analysis to try and do the calculation and arrive at 81,000 kwacha, and this 81,000 kwacha should be the compound tariff. In other texts, you find compound being called the composite tariff because it's a composition of the ad valorem as well as the specific tax. Let's now move our analysis to looking at the partial equilibrium of the tariff. So let's assume that there is a small country that imposes an import tariff to protect its small industry. Now we will look at reasons for protection later when we move to the later units. For now, let's just stick to the partial equilibrium and maybe later look at the general equilibrium. Here, a tariff will not affect world prices, and it will not affect the rest of the economy because the country is small. So it should be noted, and if you can recall, that a small nation does not affect even the terms of trade, and therefore this will not affect much of the global patterns of trade as well as the economic interactions. Okay, so we will now conduct an analysis on 4 tariff effects. The first one being the consumption effect of a tariff, and then from it we'll look at the production effect of the tariff. So from the consumption, we want to see how is the consumption pattern affected, and from the production we want to see what is happening to domestic production of the importing nation. Then we want to look at the trade effect of a tariff, how many units are being imported. Since we're looking at the import tariff in this case, so how many units will be imported when the tariff is imposed. And finally, we will look at the revenue effect of a tariff, how much will the government collect. Okay, so let's look at our graphical illustration. So assume that nation 2 is a small nation, which is the importing nation. On the vertical axis, we put the price of commodity X in dollars, and on the horizontal axis, we put commodity X. And if we assume values along the vertical and the horizontal axis, we can draw our demand curve to be downward sloping and our supply curve to be upward sloping. And then we have our equilibrium price of 3 and the equilibrium quantity of 30. Now let's begin our analysis by looking at the free trade price. Let's assume that the free trade price is 1, where we have our infinite supply curve before tariff, which is SF here. So at this point, you'll notice that the nation is producing 10 units and consuming 70 units. So if it is producing 10, it means the gap between 70 and 10 is imported. Therefore, the total amount of the import is 60. And that can be shown with these lines here. So we have the distance from 0 to 10, which is domestic production. That is what the domestic producers are supplying into the economy. And the distance from 10 to 70 being the imported amounts, which is 60. So therefore, the 60 plus the 10 gives the total consumption in the economy of 70. So we can put some points just to take note in case you want to use points. Distance from A to C is domestic production. Distance from A to B is domestic consumption. And the distance from C to B is the import. Put shortly, we are saying A to C, or let's just simply call it SC. Okay. So SC is domestic production. Okay, domestic production. Then we have AB, which is domestic consumption. So we call it dom consumption. Okay, domestic consumption. And the distance from C to B is the import. Okay, sorry, so I'm struggling because I'm using the cursor to do my drawings here. So distance from C to B is the import. So now let's assume that there is a 100% ad valorem tariff imposed on commodity X. If that is the case, then what we'll have is that the tax will shift the supply function upwards all the way to 2. It means that the infinite supply function will shift to 2 and the price will be 2 for each commodity. Now you'll notice that at this price, 20 units are produced domestically while 50 units are consumed, which means that 30 is imported. From here, let's try to put our points so that we analyze it from the points. So you'll notice that the distance from G to J becomes domestic production, while the distance from G to H is domestic consumption, that is new domestic consumption after the tariff, and then the distance from J to H is the import. What you will notice here is that because now it has become more expensive for people to import the commodity, they've resorted to buying locally. Now, because of that, local producers will have to increase on their production for them to be able to meet the demands of the nationals in that economy. As such, domestic production will increase, and this increase is brought about by the tariff. And then from it, we will see that domestic consumption will reduce because not everyone will be impressed to buy goods produced domestically. So those who cannot do without imported commodities will move away from the product, and you will notice that there is a reduction in the number of people. Let's assume that demand is people, the number of people getting the commodity. And out of this, you will notice that the import has also reduced from 60 to 30, meaning imports have reduced by half. So what we see is that distance from G to J is domestic production, and distance from C to J is an increase in domestic production. Then distance from J to H is the import. Okay, so now let's do much of it by putting some points. So out of this, you will notice that we have different regions. The region we have here is the revenue that will be generated, and then we have some parts of the imports that have been lost, and then the improvement in domestic production. Maybe from this we can take this opportunity to describe the effects of the tariff on consumption, on production, on imports, or rather trade, as well as on the revenue. Okay, so thus we see that the consumption effect of the tariff is negative 20x, meaning that consumption has reduced. So if I take you back to the graph, you will notice that consumption was 70, but because of the tariff, consumption has reduced to 50, meaning we have lost a 20 in consumption. Therefore, the consumption effect of a tariff is 20. Okay, so we can also look at the other effect, which is the production effect being 10, meaning domestic production has increased by 10 units. So we were producing at 10 initially, but because of a tariff, production has increased all the way to J, which is 20. So the increase in domestic production is 20. We can also look at the other effect, which is the trade effect. So in terms of the trade effect, we've lost 30. So this 30 is brought about by first the loss CM here. So all the way from here, from C to B, was the import. And this import comes about due to trading. So what we are seeing then is that distance from J to H shows a cut from the total imports. So J is corresponding to M here, and H is corresponding to N. If you bring these lines in analysis, you will notice that moving from M going down, you have lost 10 due to domestic producers taking over. And the other side, you have the distance from N to B, which is the loss in consumption. So these consumers who are supposed to import this are out of the market, and those who are supposed to import this have resorted to buying local products. Therefore, the trade effect is the loss in this region plus that. So we have 10 here plus the 20 here, which will give us 30. Thus, we conclude that the trade effect is 30. The last part of the effect is the revenue effect, which is the area in the middle of $30. So that's the area we have here. So this is the total revenue that the government is going to collect. So remember that 1 is the free trade price, and therefore the 100% tariff will bring the price to 2. So in other words, the tax value here is 1. And then the total amounts consumed, or rather from the import, is the gap from 20 to 50, which is 30. So if you calculate the area of this, you find that the import of 30 times the tariff imposed of $1 will give you the revenue effect of 30, meaning the government will collect $30 from this transaction. Okay, so we can make more analysis from this. So what we notice is that for the same price of 1 kwacha increase, we notice that nation 2 will end up with a tariff that is high. So note that for the same $1 increase in price in nation 2 as a result of the tariff, which goes high, number 1 is that the more elastic and flatter the demand curve is, the greater is the consumption effect. So if the demand curve is more elastic, remember when we're talking about elasticity, we're talking about the curve drawing. If this is a demand curve, then the more the curve is moving in this direction, the more elastic it is becoming. So the more elastic and flatter the demand curve is, the greater is the consumption effect. And secondly, what we will notice is that the more elastic the supply curve is, the greater is the production effect. Now let me try to take you to the graph so that we make much sense of this. So look at this graph. So if we are at this point here, where we have a free trade price of 1, and then we have a demand that is more elastic, let me assume my demand curve to be like that. Okay, pardon my drawing. So if the demand curve was like that, it means that this line was going to extend all the way to there. Because the demand curve is now more elastic, you will notice that instead of moving from this point here as a result of a 100% tariff, you have a big loss in your consumption. So the consumption effect is more when the demand is more elastic. And if the supply was more elastic, meaning let's assume that the supply was moving in that direction, which is a little bit flatter, then you will notice that the production effect was going to be more. Production was going to shift to another point as a result of this tariff. Okay, so now let's continue with our analysis and then conclude. So the more elastic the demand and supply in nation 2, the greater is the trade effect of the tariff, as well as the revenue, which will be smaller out of this. So when we're talking about trade effect, we are looking at the volumes of the imports, because we're considering nation 2 to be the importing country. So if these demand and supply are elastic, the imports will be more, whereas the revenue generated out of it will be smaller, because the change in the tariff will be small. Okay, so out of this, I conclude my session. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, please send your email to moaelias@gmail.com. I'll be sharing with you the link for YouTube that you're going to use. Please ignore this link. The link is not going through. So I'll share with you the new link, and then you will be able to watch the video at your free time. Bye-bye.